very seriously. And I believe that people understand that this is not only affecting, of course, Denmark. This is a global situation. And we have seen, of course, what happens in China, what happens in Italy, and what we are also seeing, unfortunately, in Spain. And that gives a very sad background, of course, also for what is happening in Denmark. And therefore, we have also tried from very early on to take strong measures and have a very clear communication with the Danes saying, this is serious, you have to act upon it. We have to send people home from their jobs to basically keep down the threat of the disease spreading more than it has to do. So it is a cooperated effort between all parts of the Danish government and also, of course, the people in authorities in health, but also in other parts of the Danish society, with business, with labor, and with the ordinary Danes, saying this is something we have to get through together, and we have to work together if we are to be successful.
So I want to ask you to talk about your, one of the first major countries to try to rescue and help the ordinary worker. You in Denmark, and you obviously Minister of Finance, acted very quickly to guarantee workers' salaries up to about 90% of that you've done. And it was obviously to discourage mass layoffs. How did that come about? You saw how so many other governments just, it took a long time. It took a long time for the Congress to negotiate a stimulus and rescue package, quite a long time for Britain to start, and then, after several attempts, to ramp it up. You've gone about the furthest with 90% of salaries being guaranteed. Tell me how that came about.
From very early on, we saw that this was going to hit not only the Danish society when it comes to health, of course, the safety of our citizens and the work to protect the Danes from this disease is our front and center. But we also had to look at the economy, and we could see that Danish businesses, small, medium, and also big businesses were hit immediately. And it came without any warning. It came without any responsibility from the companies affected. And we decided to do something that I believe was very crucial. And that was to go big and go fast, to basically say to business and also to the unions, we want to keep as many jobs as possible. We know, unfortunately, that we cannot save every job and we cannot save every company, but we can make a real difference if we act immediately. So with the help not only of the government, but of all of Parliament, all the parties in Parliament supported the actions we have taken, which is unprecedented. And also with what we call the Danish model, basically working with labor and also with the employers to make a plan. We did that in 2 negotiations, which both lasted less than 24 hours, to make sure that the help will come fast to those who need it very much right now.
So the Danish model it basically essentially freezes the Danish economy. Do you believe that what you did, fast and big and early, has had an effect on people's behavior? Because then they were able to stay at home and they were able to take at least a little bit of comfort in the draconian isolation measures and the ban on going to work.
What we could do with this plan is to help many families have the safety of knowing that they will receive their pay. I mean, the government, the state of Denmark will pay a big amount of the salaries for companies who are hugely affected by the consequences of the coronavirus. The company itself will also chip in, and the workers will put in 5 holidays into this agreement. So basically, in a situation where there is so much uncertainty, where everyone is concerned for obvious reasons, we could say to many, many people who would otherwise have lost their job and their income, we can help you so that you keep your salary. And when we get on the other side of the coronavirus, then they are still very close to their company. They can go back to work. It will be basically plug and play. We know, of course, that the effects of the virus will last for a long time, also when we look at the economy. But by doing this, we will make it much easier for both the employers and the employees to get back to work when the chance to do so reopens.
And get the national economy back on track, because correct me if I'm wrong, that you think this is going to cost you some 13% of GDP over the next 3 months. Is that right?
That's pretty much the figure, and we see this as an investment. Denmark has a very strong economy going into this crisis. We have AAA rating, so we also have the financial muscle to do this. However, this has never been done before in Danish history. We are in uncharted territory, but we believe that doing this with speed and resolute is the right thing to do. And we see now that small companies and medium-sized companies, and also some of the largest companies operating in Denmark, including the airline SAS, Copenhagen Airport, the big clothing company Bestseller, are using this, what we have done here, so that they do not lay off as many employees as they would otherwise have had to do, but they can keep them in their company with the help from the state.
So you're describing not just an all-of-government approach, but an all-of-society approach, even with workers giving back 5 days of annual holiday. It's pretty extraordinary. Has this, you say it's a first for Denmark, has this model ever been used anywhere before?
Not that I know of. I think we are pretty much the first doing this. And it can, of course, only be done if all of society works together. And there is a real commitment, both from business, from the labor side, and from the political parties and government. But in this time of crisis and peril, you really see the Danes coming together, working hard to get this to function. And of course, we have no illusions as to the enormity of the task ahead of us. But we believe that these steps are very important to make sure that when we are on the other side, then we can get into a more normal situation much faster than what would otherwise have been the case.
And I know you're not going to point fingers or criticize other countries, but I just wonder what your reflection is, for instance, on the UK, which was quite slow on this and then did a very fast ramp up over about 24 hours. The United States, which was also quite slow on this. I mean, I remember a couple of weeks ago, Congress was giving the president $8.3 billion. Now it's $2 trillion. And it's fairly, quick, this particular last bit of the negotiation, fairly, given the partisan nature of Congress today. They did reach across the aisle to try to get this done. But what is your observation? And do you think, well, in your case, is all of Europe doing what it needs to do to help each other and their own people?
Well, I believe that, of course, every country must find its own path. But if we can inspire others by what we have done in Denmark, I would be very pleased. Europe is struggling right now. We see terrible news coming from all European countries, in particular from Spain and Italy. And we try to help each other also in the EU. With concern to the US, I welcome the package that has been agreed on by the White House and the Senate. One must remember that this is not only very important for the US, it is also, with the role played by the US in the global economy, quite crucial that every country is doing what it can. And I believe that what we have seen with the stimulus package coming out of the United States is a very important contribution to getting the world economy back on track when we are at that point.
So let me ask you, you keep saying when we are at that point. I guess you are having to model, you're having to make some kind of predictions. When do you think, because right now, as you also know, there is a sort of a rising babble of dissent amongst some nations, some political, beliefs, that is the cure worse than the disease? In other words, is the damage to the global economy by all these mandated isolations and don't go to work worse than the healthcare crisis? And you can see that in the United States, in Poland, in many other places, they're starting to talk about going back to work sooner rather than later. What do you think of that? And when do you see the light at the end of the tunnel for your economy and the global economy?
I believe it's too soon to say, honestly. We have seen the virus spread with such speed, with such magnitude, and with such impact that it has, quite honestly, surprised, I believe, most people. And in Denmark, we believe we have not seen the worst yet when it comes to the disease, but we are doing everything we can to combat the effects of it. And we have, as you said, prolonged our initiatives until after Easter, and then we will see what will happen next. Whatever happens at some point, and I believe this is also a very important message, and that's why I carry it with me today, we will see that we get the disease under control on a global scale also, and we have to get the world economy back on track. Whether that will be sooner or later remains to be seen, but I don't think we have seen in Europe, at least, the worst yet.
All right. Well, with that warning, let me ask you about, big picture thinking coming out of this crisis. Obviously, it's exposed so many shortcomings and so many failings in institutions and infrastructure. Denmark, Italy, you have really sophisticated public healthcare systems where, people have cradle to grave, practically free treatment. Obviously, that is not the case in the United States. And yet, even in Italy, even in Denmark, as you're saying, the health systems are on the verge of being overwhelmed, and there aren't enough protective gear and all the critical frontline equipment that you need to face this. What do you think, do you hope, will be, at least in healthcare, something different, some different way of thinking going forward once out of this crisis?
I believe there will be many lessons to be learned from this crisis, both when it comes to health, when it comes to the economy, and also how to secure that our institutions and also our health organization is as strong as possible in the time to come. We have seen this disease spread with a terrible speed, and we have seen societies being affected in a way that is unprecedented. So I believe it's too early to make very big conclusions as to what we can learn for the future. But we must, out of this, be as prepared as possible when the next crisis hits. We don't know what that will be. We don't know when it will come. But of course, this situation, even though it's urgent that we deal with it now, would also give us a lot of food for thought for the years to come, I believe.
Minister Nicolai Wammen, thank you so much for joining us from Copenhagen.
You're welcome.